What's going on, everybody? C4 here today, continuing with the 7-round mock draft series, the biggest, hardest, longest mock drafts you're going to find here on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. Where today, we're going to be taking a look at the Seattle Seahawks and seeing how we could build them an offensive line somehow. Put it all together and see what we could do. We are going to be grading the free agency. We're going to be talking about quickly their 2016 drafts, seeing how that worked out, and then we will jump right into the full 7-round mock. So the Seahawks last year, 10-5-1 record, finished in the NFL 12th offensively, 5th defensively, and their MVP, in my opinion, was Russell Wilson. The fact that he was able to have his productive season and survive with that terrible offensive line, that should be credit enough. Plus, he had, statistically speaking, a decent year. Not a great year, not his best year, not probably a year that he'd be, ready to accept and be satisfied with, but he still was the most dynamic player on that Seahawks team. So there needs to be 4 free agency. I had offensive line, cornerback, defensive line, and a question mark over safety because there are the rumors and mumblings that Earl Thomas wanted to retire. And I still think, it's one of those things, once you have one foot out the door and signal that may be your intention when things get tough, if another injury happens with Earl Thomas, I may be a little bit concerned, so maybe it's time to start getting prepared in case something happens there. So looking at their free agency period, as of the 29th, they signed Blair Walsh to a 1-year, $1 million deal after they lost Stephen Hauschka in free agency. I'm giving that a D. Can't believe that. He's one of the worst kickers in the NFL. They signed Luke Joeckel, 1-year, $8 million, kind of a prove-yourself deal from the former top 5 first-round pick. I'm giving that a C+. I still think there's upside with Joeckel. He got moved around a lot while I was with the Jags at left tackle and left guard. I have no idea where he's necessarily going to play for the Seahawks, where they envision it, but there's really a spot there. He can play. If he plays left tackle or left guard, he probably will end up starting. I assume they'll probably try to have him at left tackle because he is an upgrade over George Fant, and if that's the case, I think that's a fairly optimistic, decent signing there for the Seahawks. They signed Eddie Lacy on a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. I made a video about that. I personally think I would roll with Rawls and Procise as my 2 starting running backs, and then if Alex Collins fill in as a reserve role. Personally, in my honest opinion, the fact that they had to get Eddie Lacy on like a Weight Watchers deal as like an incentive part of his contract kind of speaks to like, do you really want that on your roster? I get it. If Eddie Lacy comes in and can perform and actually comes in at playing weight, if you will, he's not bad, but I still would rather go with the younger guys. Go with Rawls, go with Procise, and Alex Collins. I disagree with that signing. They re-signed Deshaun Shedd, 1-year, $1.5 million, give it a C, and they re-signed Luke Wilson to a 1-year, $3 million deal, which could rise, I believe, based off incentives. We'll give that a C, too. He's a very solid backup tight end here, and a compliment to Jimmy Graham. But then again, you got Nick Vannett, who's from Ohio State. Vannett could probably carve out a bigger role this year, but with Luke Wilson in there, I may have to take a little set down and get ready for another year of getting very limited snaps. So looking at their 2016 draft for the Seattle Seahawks, first round, they got Jermaine Ifedi, offensive tackle of Texas A&M. I thought that was a solid pick. I thought, you got to pretty much go for the best offensive lineman available at the back end of the first round. Ifedi did not grade out very well for Pro Football Focus, which is pretty much the only good really use for Pro Football Focus I find is defensive backs and offensive linemen are the only 2 places that I really kind of look for their opinion a little bit, because it is tough to grade and really gauge it unless you're a diehard. But Ifedi, he's a work in progress, man. They're going to hope that investing a first-round pick in a big need last year can probably turn around for them here. I think he was drafted as a tackle. I think he played a little bit of right guard, I believe. So I don't know if the move is to this offseason maybe get him stronger, get his technique down, and move him and swing him back to a tackle spot. Not exactly sure. But then the second round, they got Jerron Reed from Alabama. That was an excellent pick, man. Very, very good pick here. Great value. Guy with the first-round talent. Kind of slipped. Defensive tackles last year were pretty undervalued, to be completely honest with you. Reed and Ashawn Robinson both slipped a little bit. Andrew Billings slipped to like the 4th round. So it was fairly crazy to have that and see that happen. That was great value there for the Seahawks. They had 3 third-round picks. They got C.J. Procise, Nick Vannett, and Reese Odihambo. With those 3-round picks. Well, I liked all those picks, really. I didn't think the tight end spot, the player itself was good. I just didn't really think tight end was a need for them, considering they had Luke Wilson and Jimmy Graham on the roster. But Procise, solid prospect, and he played very limited action before he got hurt, but he looked like a dynamic playmaker of the running back spot. And Odihambo, I had him mocked to the Philadelphia Eagles in a couple mock drafts as a tackle. He's a project-type player, and maybe they're hoping optimism is high that he can put it all together there. And is he even on the roster still? Let me get a quick look here. Yeah, he's still on the roster. Probably going to compete for some snaps next year. They had 2 fifth-round picks. They got Quentin Jefferson, a defensive tackle from Maryland, and Alex Collins, the running back from Arkansas. Obviously, Collins, very solid running back. Not spectacular, but he's done enough to earn out and carve out a spot here in the stable of running backs they have in Seattle. And Jefferson, I mean, I have no real idea who the hell that is. And then the 6th round, they got Joey Hunt, the center from TCU. Wait, who's that? Great. 7th round, they had 2 7th-round picks. They got Kenny Lawler, the wide receiver from Cal. And with the final pick, they got Zach Brooks, the running back from Clemson. A little bit questions. I guess they're just trying to throw as many running backs to the wall last year and see what stuck. And at least they got Alex Collins and Procise that did that for them. But overall, the Seahawks draft last year, on paper, I thought it was fairly good. I think Reed was maybe one of the steals of the draft in terms of value in the 2nd round. Procise looked good. You got a Fetty that's, potentially could get some starting snaps next year at the offensive line, which is what you continue to need to build. And Alex Collins in the 5th round was good value. So overall, not a bad draft from the Seahawks, but definitely not the strongest draft. And they've been a team, that's why they've got so good over the last 5, 6, 7 years under John Schneider. They have drafted incredibly well. And I think with this draft stacks up to the other drafts they've had, it definitely would look a little bit weaker on paper as yet. But it is still a little early to, pass the buck and give official grades on all these players. Maybe they can turn it around. Who knows? But now it's my turn in this 7th round mock draft to see if I can do a little bit better, and let's see what we can do. All right, as we jump into this draft, I think it's a very good draft to pat myself on the back. There's sometimes when I do one of these mock drafts, obviously with all 32 teams, there's some teams that I think I could have done better on or I'm not 100% satisfied on. But that is not the case here with Seattle. I think this is a very good draft class for them. So with the first pick 26 in the 1st round, I'm selecting Garrett Ballas, the offensive tackle from Utah. 6'5", 297 pounds, 34-inch arms, 4'9", 40, incredibly athletic. Really measurables-wise, at least from the athletic standpoint, reminds me a little bit of Lane Johnson when he was coming out of Oklahoma. Had a phenomenal 20-yard shuttle. I think his 3-cone and 20 yards were almost as quick as Dalvin Cook, the running back for Florida State. So he has great agility as a swing tackle, and get this guy moving. He's going to be a big-time lead blocker. And I think, there are some off-the-field things, not necessarily when he was younger, not when he's been a football player, but on the field, he's not a lot of experience. 1-year player, very similar to Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson was a JUCO quarterback that didn't have a whole lot of experience, but I do believe he has Pro Bowl potential and should be a first-round pick. Continuing, I think he's going to be a right tackle. Gary Gilliam sucks. And I assume, they drafted a Fetty, who I thought personally was going to be a right tackle. But it seems like they want to move him inside as a guard. So that right tackle spot is open for business. And I think getting a guy like Garrett Ballas here at pick 26, he can come in and take that starting job from Gary Gilliam right away. And you're slowly starting to build up that right-hand side of the offensive line. If you get Justin Britt, he's probably the only guy I believe that should remain a starter on that offensive line for Seattle. So having Justin Britt, Jermaine Ifedi, and Garrett Ballas from the center to the right side, and then you have Luke Jokel now at left tackle, that really only leaves you left guard spot. And with Mark Glowinski, or you have Reese Odihambo, who might be able to carve out a bigger role, but I think getting Ballas here is definitely the best pick and the best way to address a severe need for the Seattle Seahawks, and that is continuing to protect Russell Wilson, which they've done a pretty shit job of doing for the last couple years. So now jumping into the 2nd round, pick 58. This is a guy. This is a Seattle pick right here. This is a pick that a lot of people are gonna be like, oh, who's gonna pick him? He's not gonna. He might not play at all this year. Who's gonna get him? Sidney Jones, the corner from Washington, 6 feet tall, 186 pounds, 4.47 40 at the combine, tested incredibly well. Tape was as good as any corner in the draft. In my opinion, I had him ranked as the #1 defensive back in this year's draft. Pro comparison is Marcus Peters, because he tore his Achilles tendon. As someone, myself, that has tore my Achilles tendon, he says he's going to be back for the beginning of the year. If it's as bad as people are saying, I don't see any way that he is back at anywhere before week 8 in this year. That's if everything goes incredibly well. So, Deshaun Shedd, Jeremy Lane. Okay, obviously you got Richard Sherman, all right? Richard Sherman, solid starting corner. They added Parrish Cox. Don't really necessarily know what his role is going to be. But Deshaun Shedd and Jeremy Lane, they're I don't know what the proper word is. They don't suck, but they're not great. There's not a lot of upside there. Getting a guy like Sidney Jones doesn't have to rush in. I mean, they were pretty much comfortable with Shedd and Lane playing a lot of snaps last season, and their secondary was still very, very good. So let's not put that out of the way. But now adding a guy like Sidney Jones, you're not going to have to rush him to start. You're still getting great value in the 2nd round, a guy that should be, I think, no worse than a top 15 pick if this injury didn't happen. So this just screams of a Seattle Seahawks pick because they have the secondary that doesn't need to rush in a 2nd round pick with, for example, I can use this as an Eagle fan. I'm an Eagles fan. Sidney Jones, it would be phenomenal on the Eagles. But we can't draft a guy like Sidney Jones because we need corners that can come and contribute right away. A team like Seattle doesn't necessarily need that, and then that means they can wait. They can sit and wait on a Sidney Jones, and then once he's healthy, they debatably somehow got the best, potentially. Obviously, there's the debate up in the air between Sidney Jones and Marshawn Lattimore, but they debatably got the best corner in the 2nd round, and they eventually can have Sidney Jones, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Earl Thomas as their secondary, which is terrifying. Reloading on the defensive side of the ball is exactly what the Seahawks excel at. And I think if Sidney Jones is there at pick 58, they're going to jump all over that. And hopefully, like I said, I do think he will get some snaps next year. But like I said, no earlier than week 8. If I had to guess, I'd say week 12, 14, somewhere like that might be where you see him get on the field. But again, there's no rush going to Seattle. If he goes to another team that might rush him in before he's fully healthy, I mean, that could hurt his confidence. He might not be getting the best player. I think in a professional level, you don't have to worry about him coming back to her, that he could really re-aggravate the injury. But I think a team like Seattle would have the most patience with a player like that and, best fit for him to go. Going in the third round, they have three third-round picks, actually, so they're going to hopefully crush it here. With the first one, pick 90, we're going with the freak offensive lineman. I think you can't pass on him. A lot of people, I think it was a fifth-round pick pick before the Combine, destroyed it. And I remember looking at the NFL brought up his Combine stats, and they said anyone that's ever ran a fast 40 as he does, they had 10 offensive linemen. 9 of the 10 were good NFL players, if not great. I think Bruce Campbell, who got drafted by the Raiders, was the only bust. So here, at pick 90, I'm going with Aviant Collins, offensive tackle, offensive guard from TCU, 6'4", 295 pounds. Again, it brings incredible versatility. I think he can play inside or outside. Ran a 4.8 140 and 34 reps on the bench press. So, again, this is like one of those players that if you're reaching for him in the first round or second round, I think I'd be like, whoa. All right, let's not go for the snake oil, which is his Combine stats. His tape is not really anything too special, but we all know two things about Seattle. They need offensive linemen, and they'll gamble on guys that have athletic traits, and hopefully Tom Cable can develop them into an offensive lineman. You saw like that with guys like George Fant. Who's the other one? George Fant, another guy that didn't really play a whole lot of offensive linemen. They're still like, oh yeah, look, let's get him going. It might have been Gary Gilliam. I can't remember the top of my head, but a guy like Collins here, plenty of upside. He's an athletic machine. So I think it's definitely worth the gamble for Seattle, who need to get some offensive linemen. I think he can come in and compete left guard spot, right tackle, anywhere. Pretty much find a way to get him on the offensive side of the ball. He's one of those guys, another freak guy with that kind of speed. Jesus Christ, have him play tight end a little bit. Have him be that swing tight end to start his career. We kind of did that in Philadelphia a little bit. We had, I can't remember the name of it. We had basically two different guys, offensive tackles, that we'd bring as an extra tight end and get them involved. I think a guy like Collins could do that if you don't have a starting role carved out for him right away while he learns the technique of the next game. But he's an absolute guy that a pretty solid offensive line coach in my eyes. I don't know if a lot of people give him shit, and maybe that's an outsider looking in. Maybe if you're a Seahawks fan, you hate Tom Cable. But I think, a guy like Collins, plenty of upside. The athletic ability is off the charts. See what he can do on the offensive line. Worth the gamble, I think, here in the third round. So then with their second, third round pick 102, I'm going with Carlos Watkins, the defensive tackle from Clemson. A guy that, preseason draft rankings had him as a fringe first-round pick, 6'3", 310 pounds out of Clemson, 25 reps on the bench press at the Combine. NFL Pro comparison is Sylvester Williams, who's been a serviceable defensive tackle for the Denver Broncos. I think he just moved to the Tennessee Titans. But I think, he's like one of those guys that's like the jack of all trade. He's not a master of anything, but he has potential to definitely turn into something and won't be rushed into a starting role. I think he can come in and compete for a defensive tackle depth spot between Reuben and Jaron Reed. Right now they have Will Pirakak and Rodney Coe as their defensive tackle depth. So I think a guy like Carlos Watkins, at worst case scenario, should be a solid depth defensive tackle for the entirety of his career. That's what they need. They need defensive tackle depth here, and I think in the third round, and getting a guy like Carlos Watkins, who's experienced, played in big games, is a great fit for the Seattle Seahawks. Jump to their third round pick 106. Staying on the defensive line, I'm going with Jordan Willis, the defensive end from Kansas State. 6'4", 255 pounds, 4'5", 40, 39-inch vertical. I remember the 20-yard split in his 40-yard or the 10-yard. It was either 10 or 20 split in his 40-yard dash. It was one of the best ever to test at a combine. Phenomenal explosion. His tape's not great, but he has great versatility. And I think at the defensive end spot, you need to reload. Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, they're getting up there in age. They do have Frank Clark, who I think will eventually supplant one of them. But they're both, Cliff Averill and Bennett are both around the same age. They're getting up there. I think they're both going to start to regress around the same time. And the current depth behind Cliff Averill is Tavares Barnes. I think again, a guy like Jordan Willis, a guy who's a freak athlete, great speed, doesn't have to rush right away. You can work on the technique. Phenomenal. Pretty much everyone on that defensive staff on Seattle is a great developer, great molder. And I think getting a player like Jordan Willis with incredibly high ceiling here in the third round to pretty much get you're ready. Once Bennett and Cliff Averill call it a day, you're gonna have Frank Clark and Jordan Willis coming off of the depth and starting right there again. Seattle Seahawks, the master of reloading on the defensive side of the ball. And I think Jordan Willis is that guy here in the third round. Jumping to the 6th round pick, 210. I've been going with the only kicker I think that will get drafted this year, and that is Zane Gonzalez, the kicker from Arizona State, 6 feet tall, 202 pounds. NFL Pro comparison is Dustin Hopkins, who was very good last year for the Washington Redskins. I think he now has the tagline for Zane Gonzalez is the most prolific field goal kicker in college history. And I think he's the only guy right now that should come in and be an instant starter. Right now, Blair Walsh is their kicker after losing a very good kicker in Steven Hauschka. So I think they reload here in the 6th round and get the top kicker in the draft class in Zane Gonzalez. Because you can't go with Blair Walsh as your starter. And then finish out the draft in the 7th round pick, 226. I have them getting a free safety, Delano Hill. Free safety, strong safety. I think he's somewhat versatile. The body size says strong safety. The way he tests it says free safety. So that's kind of more depth than what you need. I do think looking at their safety squads, they probably should use more strong safety depth. They got Bradley McDougall, who came in from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers behind Errol Thomas. I think that's great depth there. But as a strong safety, there's no one behind Cam Chancellor right now. I think Kelsey McRae is still unsigned. So a guy like Delano Hill in the 7th round from Michigan, 6'1", 215 pounds, 4'4", 740, 17 reps on the bench press. In the box safety, big-time tackler. I think he can learn a thing or two from Cam Chancellor. Prospects are high, could contribute on special teams if you don't decide to throw him on the practice squad. Good value here in the 7th round for the Seahawks. And that is my 7th-round mock draft for the Seattle Seahawks. Let me know, Seahawks fans, if you're a diehard in the comment section below if you agree or disagree with any of my picks. I look forward to getting some insightful posts. If this is your first time seeing the channel, if you want to spread the word to your Seahawks fans, let them know. Subscribe if you enjoyed. Smash the like button. We get 100 likes. Tomorrow's video will be the Kansas City Chiefs 7th-round mock draft. And thank you guys for watching. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.